So we've all heard the news, right? NASA is going back to the moon. But here's the thing. There's a twist in the story. The mission we all thought was going to be the big, triumphant return to the lunar surface, well, it now has a totally new and maybe even more important job to do.
For the very first time, we're not just going back to the moon. We're aiming for a completely new and wild frontier, the lunar South Pole. And let me tell you, this is not the gray, dusty landscape we all remember from the Apollo missions. Nope. This is a place of extreme light and permanent darkness, a place we've really only ever seen through the eyes of robots.
And that quote right there, that's the key. The whole point of the Artemis program is so much bigger than just paying a visit. It's all about figuring out how to stay. This is about setting up a real, long-term human presence, a foothold for science that could last for weeks and down the line, even months.
So you have to wonder, why this specific spot? Why go to all the trouble of targeting this super challenging destination? Why brave the crazy extremes of the South Pole?
Well, because the South Pole is basically a scientific jackpot. You see, it has these craters that are permanently in shadow. Some spots haven't seen a single ray of sunlight in billions of years, and in that cold dark, they might hold huge amounts of water ice. And that ice, it's more than just water. It's potential rocket fuel, it's breathable air. On top of that, the area's got some of the oldest rocks in the solar system, just sitting there, waiting to tell us how the moon and maybe even our own planet came to be.
But you can't just show up and try to land in a brand new world like that. Before astronauts can take that first step, NASA had to be absolutely sure they could get there safely again. And that was the whole point of Artemis II.
The Artemis II mission, slated for 2026, is going to send 4 astronauts on a 10-day journey. Now, they're not landing, but what they are doing is maybe even more important at this stage. It's a crucial test flight with a crew on board, basically a high-speed slingshot around the far side of the moon and back. This is designed to push the Orion spacecraft and all its life support systems to the absolute limit in deep space with people inside for the very first time. Now, one of the most important tests on that flight is something they call prox-ops, or proximity operations. Basically, after the crew separates from the big rocket booster, they actually take manual control of the 25-ton Orion capsule. They use that spent rocket stage as a kind of moving target to practice flying near. They have to prove they can pilot this thing by hand, which is an absolutely vital skill for the tricky docking maneuvers they'll need to do on later missions.
And guess what? They nailed it. The pilot, Victor Glover, said the spacecraft handled beautifully. So Artemis II proved the ride to the moon is solid. With that major piece of the puzzle solved, NASA could take a good, hard look at the next big hurdle, the landing itself.
So with Artemis II proving the spacecraft is good to go, that means Artemis III is the main event, right? Boots on the moon? Well, this is where the playbook got a major update. After looking at all the risks, NASA decided to make a really strategic shift. They decided to add one more incredibly important step before anyone tries to land on the moon. Yup, the mission for Artemis III has officially changed. It is no longer the first lunar landing. Its new job is to be the final, full-scale dress rehearsal. And it's all happening a lot closer to home.
You heard that right. Instead of flying all the way out to the moon, the crew of Artemis III will stay right here, in low Earth orbit. Their whole mission is to test the most complicated, most unproven piece of the entire puzzle, the Human Landing System, or HLS. And they'll do it for the first time with astronauts on board.
And this test is just so important. I mean, think about it. The landers like SpaceX's Starship HLS are revolutionary, but they're also insanely complex. This mission lets the crew practice docking with it, test out the brand new spacesuits, and make sure every single system works perfectly, all in the relative safety of Earth orbit. It's all about knocking down every possible risk before they commit to that long journey into deep space.
So once the lander is fully checked out and the crew is completely trained on the real hardware, then the real landing mission can finally kick off.
Artemis IV, which is now on the books for 2028, that's the mission that will finally put human boots back on the surface of the moon. The plan is pretty complex. Orion flies the crew out to lunar orbit, where they'll link up with the lander. Then, 2 astronauts will transfer over and head down to the South Pole for a pretty long stay.
And they're not just getting out for a few hours to grab some rocks. The plan is for the surface crew to live and work at the South Pole for about a week. They'll be doing science, setting up experiments, and exploring a part of the moon that no human being has ever seen with their own eyes.
So when you look at this careful, step-by-step plan,
Artemis II is the flight test, Artemis III is the gear rehearsal, and Artemis IV is the landing. It really shows you that the goal of this whole new era is fundamentally different from what we did before.
Apollo was a sprint. It was a race, plain and simple, to plant a flag. And it was incredible, don't get me wrong, but it was temporary. Artemis is a marathon. It's about building a sustainable presence, setting up infrastructure, and learning how to live on another world for long stretches of time. The goal isn't just to get there, it's to stay there.
Because at the end of the day, the moon isn't the final destination. Every single piece of technology they test, every procedure they perfect, every lesson they learn about living and working on another world, it's all just practice for the next giant leap in human exploration, sending astronauts to Mars.
This whole deliberate plan, especially that smart, strategic pivot for Artemis III, is what makes all this possible. It's turning the moon from a place we visited a long time ago into a launch pad for the future of humanity in our solar system, which really makes you wonder, what's the next chapter going to look like?